At that moment, a certain person was looking attentively at his phone, not being distracted by what was happening around him. The girl claimed that recently shamans have been consulting in the film industry everywhere and are increasingly appearing on screen. Just today, they invited one of the best gentlemen Shikan from the temple in Yonghedong to discuss the growth of shamanic beliefs. At this time, the man could not hold back his laughter and continued to laugh as if he did not take what was happening seriously. Some guy couldn't figure out if he really had the best specialist in front of him among all those present. He was sure that all this was complete nonsense and they were just insignificant worms digging in outright delirium. It seems that they predict fate, but in reality they only repeat advice from popular self-help books. At that moment, two unfamiliar girls were sitting quietly next to the woman, as if waiting for some ritual to be completed. They explained that they had asked her for help and had given her some items as a sign of respect. For this reason, she noticed something that seemed important to the completion of the ritual. The woman said they chose the cheapest option, kept demanding more, and were annoying her like students. Meanwhile, someone was standing on the street as if waiting for a signal or the right moment to act. Passers-by bowed before these people, showing respect and perhaps even a little fear, and those who had greater insight observed what was happening from the outside, drawing their own conclusions. At this moment, men held talismans with money inside which evoked pity or conversely envy. Those who were able to advise the business conveyed words of recognition from the chairman and a sign of respect in the form of a talisman. The woman at that moment watched him with interest, as if trying to catch something important in him. And in this area she was asked to take care of those who came with sincere prayers. Income from such practices remained stable and sometimes even significantly exceeded the regional average. At that moment the girl was overcome with intense fear, barely able to contain her internal tension. However, high profits come with equally high risks, where the collapse of a business is tantamount to the death of a shaman. People ask the master to save their political party, hoping for the power of supernatural intervention. If this continues, the ruling party will easily appropriate everything it needs again. And others, more desperate and courageous individuals, looked for ways to influence the situation and change it. The man expressed the idea that they must really want it, otherwise there is no point. Some even get involved in politics, especially when they see that the politician they support is already on top. He thanked them for choosing their candidates for the court representing a party called New Korea. And all this is done solely for the sake of the people, with sincere faith and fortitude of spirit. Thus he receives not only money but also recognition in society, becoming a figure of public significance. However, none of this ever ended truly well for someone like him. So who then is worthy of the title of the best, and who is he if he despises other people's work so much? The first question can be answered immediately. The real best specialist works right here in this place. At that moment, the guy turned his head to the left, trying not to miss anything important from his field of vision. There was something strange reflected in his eyes that caught his attention and made him think. It was the financial capital of South Korea, the Uido area, known for its economic power. There are many financial companies concentrated here, creating a powerful core of the modern economic system. A person who guesses at least the rise or fall of one of thousands of shares easily earns billions. It is only necessary to artificially provoke a price fluctuation of 0.1% to launch powerful financial processes. And then companies shower the shamans with tens of billions in cash in the form of daily bonuses. At that moment, the man was on the podium, attracting the attention of everyone present. He smiled reservedly when they brought him the money, as if he knew he had earned it in advance. This place possessed real magic, captivating everyone who found themselves within its walls. Meanwhile, a purple car was racing through the city at high speed, attracting the attention of passers-by. Inside it sat a man with pink hair, a representative of the temple where the best shamans of the country work. The car accelerated sharply, turning on full power as if trying to escape pursuit. At this time, the elderly man looked thoughtfully into the distance, as if immersed in his own thoughts. The man was removed from the car in a wheelchair with care and respect. After this, he was taken inside the building without drawing unnecessary attention to what was happening. Only a select few were here, the elite among the elite, the pinnacle of the spiritual and economic hierarchy. At this time, one guy was calmly listening to music, as if he was completely detached from the surrounding chaos. His appearance was completely inappropriate. He looked like a real bandit, arousing suspicion in everyone present. The atmosphere was reminiscent of an all-star soccer game held in a huge arena in the summer with fans screaming. At that moment nearby stood small children, nuns, and a man who looked like a real king of the past. The whole event seemed like a replica of the Sejong Cultural Center, filled with ceremonies, dances, and respected representatives of traditions. Everyone around turned their attention to the strange man in a suit who looked completely out of place. However, there was one significant but that could have a dramatic impact on the course of further events. Many wondered who he was and why he appeared at this crucial moment. Soon they will see everything for themselves and will be able to understand how important a figure this person is. He left the room, and at that very moment he was solemnly greeted right on the roof of the building. The director said that we could go to the lounge and get down to business. There were no other meetings planned. He also reported that all necessary preparations have already been completed, and the assigned tasks can begin to be carried out. The guy began to slowly descend the stairs, concentrating on controlling his breathing and every movement. At that very moment, everyone present was watching him, not taking their eyes off his figure. He then confidently began to undress, demonstrating calm strength and readiness for the subsequent sacred act. He took off his outerwear completely and carefully began to braid his hair into a tight braid. A moment later, he was given a special robe intended exclusively for participation in this ritual. He began to put on a long cloak decorated with traditional symbols and protective patterns. After this, all the participants of the ceremony, without a word, headed with him towards the nearest elevator. He checked to see if everything was prepared properly and received an affirmative answer from the assistant in charge. Right in front of the front door, someone began to sprinkle salt, performing the obligatory ritual of cleansing the space. The guy took a step forward, looked inside the room, and froze, assessing the situation with his gaze. A second later, he opened both doors, inviting the rest of the participants to follow him inside. All the people in the room immediately greeted him with respect and a slight bow of the head. There were also animals inside the building, including pigs and several fat cows. There one could also see many tools needed for the upcoming sacrificial ritual. There was also a band inside the room ready to accompany the proceedings with the sounds of live music. Everyone watched the guy's actions, carefully waiting for clear commands and instructions from his hand. The girl said that the target was Ilan Bayo. After the stock market closed, rumors about the Food and Drug Administration's decision appeared, as a result of which the shares rose by more than 8%. It is necessary to urgently stop the growth and reverse the downward trend since the volume of put options is too large. The director said that he is ready to invest $1 billion in cash from the card, counting on a confident decrease in the price. The volumes of transactions were truly impressive, and they inspired respect even among the most experienced and seasoned market players. But those who are pushing the price up are unlikely to remain idle. She explained that behind this are Conam Capital, Global Leaders Investors Club, and several other small management companies to whom the risks have been transferred. Apparently they are serious about destroying their opponents. There are rumors that they have brought a senior shaman who has served the spirit of Mount Kyrison for 50 years. They say that it was this shaman who provoked talk about the growth of shares on the over-the-counter market. Whether they will be able to stop it, no one knows for sure. The further a shaman moves away from his sacred land, the faster his spiritual and ritual power weakens. In this situation, it would be wiser to call on someone who worships the local mountain spirit rather than a stranger. Meanwhile, the guy took out his weapon, demonstrating his readiness for the next, more brutal stage of the ritual. He said that, simply put, the local spirits here meant nothing to him and had no power. On this earth, their bath has no power and he can no longer interfere. The guy asked ironically whether they would release the bear or continue to drag out time until the last minute. A bear in this context is a market participant who bets on a fall and makes money on a falling rate. The drums began to play louder and louder, filling the room with an alarming rhythm and increasing the tension. The guy raised his hand with the weapon up as if giving a signal to begin the final part of the ritual. After that, he closed his eyes, immersed in complete concentration and turning his attention away from what was happening. The guitarist began to play abruptly, adding tense chords and distorted sounds to the overall atmosphere. The next second, the guy quickly rose into the air as if caught by an invisible mystical force. Almost immediately after this, they killed the cow, causing great shock to all witnesses. All but one guard turned away abruptly, not wanting to look at the bloody scene. The boy then killed the pig with ease, acting quickly perfectly coolly, and without any hesitation. One of the men could not bear what he saw, fell to his knees, and turned away. At this point, the guy set fire to some piece of paper, thus completing the most important element of the ritual. The musicians continued to play their instruments, maintaining an atmosphere of tension and mystery around what was happening. The entire floor was covered in blood, creating a dark and disturbing backdrop for the events that followed in the room. The guy walked with difficulty to the end of the corridor, feeling more and more tired and in pain with each step. At this time, a tense silence reigned in the company. People were waiting for further news and decisions. On the second Tuesday of September, trading opened, and after that, everyone suddenly fell silent watching the changes. The man did not understand the situation because before the opening the shares had risen by 8% and now they had fallen by 10%. The second bald man said that they were in deep shit and there was no way out of the situation. They said that the shamans had lost to their company, leaving it without support and strength to fight. He lost to the king of collapse, and now the entire market movement was under the complete control of the enemy. At that moment the shaman felt ill. He began to cough up blood and experience severe pain. At some point the man was in the office watching what was happening through a monitor and connections. The guy, completely covered in blood, watched all this, feeling a mixture of horror and determination inside. A crowd of people gathered near the ambulance below, trying to understand the reasons for what happened and help the victims. Despite this, no one knew exactly who he was or what his role was in these events. He was a shaman who was accused of ruining someone else's company named Chun Chiang, and he was going to tell the story of his success. It all started when he was studying with his grandmother in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the city's slums. This temple was called Chun Chiang and was in a dangerous state, subject to demolition, and entry into it was prohibited. He stood near the closet when he was 18 years old, preparing for a new stage in his life. At that moment, Chun Chiang began his journey full of trials and unexpected discoveries that changed his destiny forever. The young grandmother was a famous shaman in the area, respected for her abilities and wisdom. She was revered and feared at the same time, considered a powerful and unpredictable spiritual guide. However, now sitting alone, she was left without children and support, having completely lost her former status. It was an unfortunate old woman who was carrying a child who had been abandoned by his parents. Chun Chiang went to his grandmother's place at that moment to support her and help her in difficult times. Grandma said that she was very hungry and dreamed of food that she had not been able to afford for a long time. She explained that the guy had given her something to eat last time and now she was hoping for his help again. When he became a teenager, she began to experience memory lapses and frequent loss of touch with reality. Despite this, much in their lives remained the same and they continued to struggle through difficulties together. Chun Chiang asked what kind of food she wanted since he promised to feed her before school if she was hungry. She continued to say that she was hungry, never ceasing to ask for help despite her fatigue and illness. Chun Chiang promised that he would come during the big break to give her something to eat, since he was currently watching TV. He kicked the door and walked out of the room, trying to focus on the task at hand and not get distracted. Then Chun Chiang left his yard and headed towards the street, quickening his pace due to his lateness. His main tool was an old broken telephone with which he kept track of the time and news. He looked at his watch and realized that he was late, so he hurried so as not to miss the important event. Realizing this, he ran, not paying attention to fatigue and possible obstacles along the way. They thought that his bad luck would end there, but there were even more serious trials ahead. Chun Chiang entered the classroom where the atmosphere was tense and filled with hidden hostility. All this was only the beginning of the troubles that the young man was yet to experience on the path to growing up. When he entered, he was very surprised that much more difficult tests awaited him than he thought. Being a poor orphan living in a shaman's house meant that there would always be those around who wanted to do harm. His bullying was endless, and it seemed like no one was going to protect the young man in trouble. When he arrived, his classmates immediately called him a sorcerer and began to laugh and ridicule him. He replied that he would be with them today, and they bought him some bean porridge so as not to get mixed up with the ghosts. They immediately put porridge on the table to make sure that he would eat it and not go hungry. Chun Chiang remained silent and did not respond, trying to ignore the attacks and ridicule. He began to lift the vessel with porridge, trying to concentrate and not show his emotions to the people around him. Then he silently removed the porridge from the table, demonstrating his attitude and unwillingness to accept what was happening. The guy couldn't stand such impudence and abruptly dropped his head onto the table, showing irritation and anger. He asked who asked him to protect the desk, calling him names and demonstrating his superiority over him. He said he bought it himself and decided to ignore the friendly gesture or just not pay attention to it. The main character remained silent, not expressing any emotions and not entering into an argument with those around him. He added that he didn't care because he spent his own money and was not going to change his mind. Chun Chiang began to slowly raise his head, gathering his strength and preparing for further action. He looked at the guy with fury in his eyes, showing all his determination and inner tension. The guy just looked at him and was a little scared, not understanding what to do next. Then Chun Chiang turned around and started to walk away, and the guy tried to ask him a question. Chun Chiang walked away silently, not responding to attempts to start a conversation or stop it. After that, he slammed the door, demonstrating his displeasure and desire to be alone without unnecessary words. One of them did not understand whether he was going to see his class teacher with the best of intentions or by mistake. His face was filled with anger and determination, as if he was about to punch Jihen like in the movie. The guy exhaled heavily, trying to calm down and focus on what was happening around him. He didn't care, let him knock as much as he wanted, because his father was a pastor and he was behaving provocatively. At that moment, Chun Chiang listened attentively to everything that was happening, assessing the situation and thinking about his actions. Typically, stories about school bullying begin with the protagonist denying reality or hoping for a savior. The protagonist either ignores what is happening or waits for someone to come and solve the problem for him. But their actions angered him so much that he lost his patience and lost his temper. Chun Chiang was rushing somewhere, hurrying to prepare a response to what had happened. He prepared a special punishment for them, declaring that they themselves had crossed the line and deserved punishment. At this moment, Chun Chiang was collecting a bag of necessary items for the upcoming ritual and plan. He was in the butcher's shop, choosing the necessary ingredients that he would need for further actions. The guy then headed to the city library to find some important information that could help in the case. Oddly enough, he sat down at the computer and began searching for information, carefully studying the data he found. The protagonist found information about Kim Jae-hyun that could play a key role in his plans. Chun Ji-sung printed out Kim Jae-hyun's photo and headed to the right place, holding it in his hands. He held the picture tightly and went home, thinking about his next steps and decisions. At that moment, an expensive but obviously defective car was parked near his house, attracting the attention of neighbors and passers-by. The hero opened the door and entered his grandmother's room, returning home after a long and stressful day. She asked if he had come to feed her, to which he replied that it was not yet time for that. She complained that another one had come without feeding her and was standing in someone else's room behaving shamelessly. The protagonist remembered that people from the reconstruction committee had come to them today, but he did not remember the details of the conversation with the shaman. He wondered if these visitors could be old customers who had decided to visit them again. Then the guy noticed some key on the table, which immediately caught his attention and aroused his interest. The chief said briefly that he would quickly finish everything and set the table so that they could get down to business. Today they had blood sausage on the menu, which seemed unusual and significant for the upcoming ritual. The main character looked closely at the photographs of his parents, trying to find support and inspiration in them. He began opening doors with the key, moving around the house and preparing for further action. He opened one of the rooms that contained things and memories from the past that were important to him. He remembered how his grandmother performed similar rituals to protect the family from evil spirits and misfortunes. To send damage, it was first necessary to determine the target at which the magical influence would be directed. The next step was to make a sacrifice that would act as a mediator between the spirit world and reality. Then it was necessary to chant a mantra, calling upon the necessary forces and setting them up to carry out the task. And finally, prepare all the necessary tools to complete the ritual and achieve the desired effect. The main character began to carefully prepare for all this, thinking through every step in action. He repeated to himself once again that they themselves had crossed the line and now they must bear the consequences. They themselves crossed the line, so now they must bear full responsibility for their actions and the consequences. Chun Chiang planned to perform the ritual at night when the magical power is at its maximum and most powerful. The guy began to wave his weapon, symbolizing the beginning of the ritual and readiness for decisive action against enemies. The main character turned on the required song and performed all the ritual actions according to traditions and established rules. He also made sacrifices, observing all the necessary customs and rituals to achieve the desired result. The protagonist continued to perform the ritual for some time, carefully monitoring his every movement and word. The girl with a cigarette in her teeth watched what was happening, and it seemed to her that it was very interesting and unusual. In this chaotic cacophony of sounds, one could discern a voice that was casting spells, creating a mystical atmosphere. The man nodded his head, confirming the words he had heard and demonstrating his agreement with what was happening. This seemed strange because Halmangu was in such a state that she could not perform the ritual, and besides she was the daughter of a real ritual shaman. She asked when he would like to go home, being sure that there were no traces of strangers or outsiders there. He replied that he had not found the room where the teenager was supposed to live, which raised his doubts. The girl was very interested in all this, and she could not hide her curiosity about the situation. She told Chilgon that he should sort all this out in the evening and take the necessary measures. The protagonist seemed to have already completed his actions and was ready for the next stage of events. He suggested that the man check the guy who could be Babkin's heir in order to understand the whole situation. He also asked to check the condition of the one he had attached in order to clarify everything completely. The man said he would take care of it after he took her to the office so that everything would be under control. After this, the car moved off, but strangely enough did not go to the office, causing confusion. At this time, the main character had already brought food to his grandmother, taking care of her after a long day. It was the hero's own recipe fried blood sausage used as a sacrifice for the ritual. At that moment, the guy was sitting on some concrete platform resting after the tense events. He said that finally after lunch he could rest a little and gain strength for further action. At that moment, ash fell on his hair and immediately began to flow down, causing confusion and the question of what it could be. First, he dropped his cigarette, and it began to fall even faster, increasing his confusion. The guy couldn't understand what exactly was happening and tried to comprehend the situation as time went on. After some time, his friends realized that he had fallen from the roof and urgently decided to call the teacher for help. At this time, the car was parked awaiting further events and decisions. The girl noticed something unusual that caught her eye and interested her. The man came and said that Chun Chiang lived in that house. He was 18 years old. He was the grandson of a local shaman. He added that Chun Chiang was abandoned by his grandmothers to raise him, and he has been living in this house for more than 8 years. She asked who exactly he wanted to paint with the ritual and why. He replied that it was his classmate, or rather a bully, who constantly bullied him. The girl said that everything was clear now and asked how the poor guy was doing now. At this moment, the man thought, remembering the latest news and events related to him. They say he fell off the roof this afternoon and broke both his legs, which has caused everyone to sympathize. The girl asked what this meant for the case and how the situation would develop now. Everything was decided before he even started acting, and no one should recruit him into their ranks. At that moment, the door opened abruptly, interrupting the conversation and attracting the attention of everyone present. The girl and the man stood right in front of the guy, waiting for his reaction and explanation. The protagonist opened the door for them and looked at them, and it was from that moment that his ascent began. The girl asked his name again to make sure that this was the man she was looking for. She said that he was the best of all the shamans in the city that she had found, and that the first meeting with him was special. The last bud on the old venerable tree is about to bloom, symbolizing the beginning of a new era and change. His photo is ready to blossom, as if promising to reveal the secrets and possibilities hidden in a person. Chun Chiang didn't understand why there was knocking on doors in the middle of the night and why people were just staring at him. He said that if it was about skating, then grandma doesn't greet them and they don't do it anymore. The girl immediately interrupted him, stating that they had come to him with an important proposal and question. Chun Chiang could not understand why this was necessary at all and remained perplexed as to their goals. The girl remained silent and looked at him attentively, as if expecting an answer or reaction from him. She asked what the minimum hourly rate was now, to which he replied that 10,000 was the standard. She said either 10,000 or 11,000 and didn't understand why another 30% had to be added. She added that she didn't have change, so she would like to pay without small change and unnecessary complications. Chun Chiang looked at everything that was happening nervously, trying to figure out how best to behave in this situation. She asked if she had a 50,000 note to pay the entire amount at once. The man began to carefully search for the necessary bill at the girl's request, trying to help her pay for the service on time. He said that he didn't have enough change to exchange a large sum of money which exceeded 1,000,000 rubles. The girl then suggested deducting the remaining amount from Chilgon's salary in order to quickly resolve the financial issue between them. Chun Chiang realized that these people were nothing more than strangers with money in front of someone else's poor house. He said that if they had no business with him, he would simply leave and not waste his time on them. But suddenly he was grabbed sharply by the arm, not allowing him to leave and forcing him to stay in place for a conversation. The girl said she would pay him 20 times the minimum wage to buy his time and full attention. It was too much money to refuse, so Chun Chiang and the girl sat in front of the supermarket discussing the details. She asked what area it was because there wasn't even a 24-hour store, let alone a cafe. At that moment, a man came out from around the corner, attracting attention with his sudden and decisive manner of behavior. Chun Chiang thanked him for his help and participation in the conversation, which calmed him down a little. He then asked what exactly they wanted to discuss, if they had bought his time, and invited him here specifically. He asked if he had really performed the ritual of corruption that was being talked about around him and in other people's conversations. Chun Chiang began to wipe away the soda he had just spat out, trying to focus and control his emotions. The girl said that he was guilty because the consequences of the ritual now make him disabled, crippled for life. Chun Chiang began to get nervous, realizing that the situation was getting out of control and required an immediate explanation. He asked if they had any evidence of guilt that would confirm that it was he who performed the curse ritual. You can't go to the police with such an accusation because no one knows for sure whether he performed this ritual. Chun Chiang began to get angry due to the unfair accusations and lack of evidence against him. The guy asked to explain who exactly sent them, his parents or someone else who knows what he did. She asked what he was muttering under his breath, as if he was trying to justify himself or explain something. The girl then moved closer, creating a tense atmosphere and strong pressure on the protagonist. She said she didn't care why he broke that bastard's legs and wasn't going to blame him. Chun Chiang didn't understand why they came and what exactly they wanted to achieve from him in this situation. The girl began to lick her lips, demonstrating determination and readiness to use all means to achieve her goal. She pointed her finger at him and said that she needed his gift: the ability to perform rituals and curses, the ability to harm people through rituals, and Chun Chiang couldn't figure out if that was what they wanted to hire him for. He imagined that if he were given all the necessary materials, then with his gift the ritual would be very powerful. Chun Chiang thought about his grandmother and her teachings, remembering that there are lines that cannot be crossed. He said that such things should not be done because there are lines that should never be crossed. There are boundaries and rules, the violation of which leads to serious and irreversible consequences in life and destiny. She paid him 200,000 so for at least an hour. He is her worker and must fulfill all her requests. She did not ask him to kill people, but only to curse certain ones who would be assigned to do so without unnecessary violence. It turned out that it was a corporation that took rituals seriously and used them for its own purposes. Chun Chiang couldn't understand what exactly the word corporation meant in their business and magical context. The girl told him to listen to her, silently calling him slow-witted, and noted that 1,000,000 intended to irritate her. If a gifted shaman performs a ritual for a corporation, its business will go uphill, and its shares will rise on the stock exchange. Conversely, if a corruption ritual is carried out, the company will begin to have serious problems and its shares will fall. A breaking news report at the site of the new housing complex reported that there were no fatalities, which improved the reputation. All this leads to the rise or fall of stocks, and that is why investment firms hire real shamans. They take such rituals seriously and are willing to pay big money for successful results. Asset managers, investment firms, and banks employ a variety of shamans to influence financial markets. They truly believe in the power of such rituals and consider them important for economic success. The shamans themselves have serious knowledge and experience doing their work professionally and effectively. They are paid huge sums, from tens of millions to hundreds of millions of rubles, for the rituals they perform. The best specialists receive billions of rubles for their services and influence on the market performance of companies. The girl is engaged in searching for and recruiting such shamans for the corporation and its business tasks. She took out a business card and offered cooperation, promising decent pay and comfortable conditions. She asked to sell her abilities, promising that the payment would be high and would not cause disappointment. Chun Chiang took the business card, thinking about how his life would change after this offer and cooperation. Who exactly ran this corporation was a mystery to many, and no one knew for sure. Many doubted how morally correct this was, since it concerned ordinary human values. What does it mean to sell your abilities? An ordinary person in his place would have thought about it after listening to her speech carefully. but for the poverty-stricken Chun Chiang all this sounded empty and distant, insignificant. Instead, one phrase that the woman said with confidence was firmly lodged in his head. She said they pay tens of millions and top-notch specialists receive billions for their work. Even if billions are received by a few, the average income in this business would be very high. He could get his grandmother into a good nursing home, which she had always secretly dreamed of. Chun Chiang remembered how he washed his grandmother himself and took care of her with love and patience. There was a soap next to him which reminded him of those moments and his great responsibility towards her. He could leave this area, which could be demolished at any moment, without warning or mercy. He could live without worrying about money like most of his peers, without thinking about daily survival. Chun Chiang thought about all this for a long time, weighing the pros and cons, trying to make a decision. He understood that he would not only be able to survive but live in luxury and prosperity that was previously unavailable. He could wipe the noses of those people who once underestimated him, mocked him, and seriously despised him. Chun Chiang recalled how his parents abandoned him at the most difficult moment of his life and stayed. They just walked away silently without saying a word, leaving him alone and in deep pain. He cried and screamed, begging them not to leave him alone, but they ignored all his pleas. Chun Chiang once again thought about the past and the losses that forever changed his destiny and character. Then he suddenly raised his head up as if he had made a final and irreversible decision in his life. The girl noticed this and realized that he had already carefully weighed everything and was ready to give an answer. She asked what his response would be to her proposal and whether he was ready to cooperate with them. Chun Chiang said he agreed because he really needed the money to change his life. The girl put out her cigarette and smiled, realizing that she had achieved her goal and won the negotiations. After that, she said that it was an excellent and timely decision and it was time to start. She announced that they could now set out on their journey and begin their long-awaited collaboration. Chun Chiang asked where exactly they were going to go to understand the nature of the upcoming mission. She replied that a place awaited them where he would test his abilities and get a high-paying job, but first a test. The girl turned to the man and told him to start the car and get ready for the trip without delay. She added that she would not allow him to travel for free, as the pay would be 5 times the hourly rate for the work. Chun Chiang objected that he would not go for 300,000 rubles for 6 hours of work. It was too expensive. He said he was willing to work for 9,000, which was significantly less than she expected from him. The girl became interested in this answer and abruptly stopped the car to discuss it in more detail with him. He explained that 300,000 divided by 900 is almost 50 times more, which seems unfair. One of the girls sitting nearby was very surprised and could not believe her ears at such a bold bet. She said she found him funny and unusual with such demands and self-confidence. At that moment, the car stopped and they arrived at the place where the test and verification of his abilities would take place. The girl said that in order to prepare the test, she needed to know in detail the style of conducting his rituals and the methods used. Now she wants him to answer all her questions in detail and talk about his approaches to rituals. She asked what sacrifice he made, what tools and instruments he used during the ritual. He replied that he had used blood sausage as a sacrifice, which left the girl surprised and perplexed. The girl asked incredulously whether he really used blood sausage in his rituals. It seemed strange to her. He explained that the music was turned on by accident, the first death metal band he came across on YouTube, and the weapons were his grandmother's old shovel. Despite all this strangeness, he was able to break a man's legs, so if at least one element was real and correct. He added that in that case he would have killed the person if the ritual had been performed truly seriously and correctly. It seemed that the girl found something more valuable in him than she expected, and she wondered if maybe he should have lied to impress her better. She asked to be connected to the preparation team via speakerphone to discuss further actions and the ritual plan. The guy started dialing the number and contacting the right people to coordinate the upcoming event. The man reported that the connection had been established and everyone was ready to perform the ritual at the appointed time. The girl announced that tonight they would perform a curse ritual that would have a significant impact on the target. The main character was very surprised to hear such serious plans and to realize the scale of the upcoming operation. Firstly, the victim preparation and survival team never performed the ritual with a living victim because one soul is enough for the ritual. Suddenly someone started knocking loudly on the door, which immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the room and caused alertness. The man jumped out of the room and started shouting indignant that someone was banging on the door at such a late hour without warning. They were offered 30 million to persuade them to open the door and allow them in without any questions or problems. After this, they said that they would take with them one cow which would be used for ritual sacrifice during the ceremony. One of the men carried the cow on his shoulders, as if it was a normal thing for him, not paying attention to the surprised looks of those around him. She was informed that everything was ready, after which she went on to explain that the music team would perform the ritual with death metal instead of traditional music. She asked to find a group performing at a club or a rehearsal space somewhere in Hongdae or Uido to bring them over for the performance. At this moment, some group was already performing on stage, creating an atmosphere and musical accompaniment for the upcoming ritual. During this time, they had no intention of relaxing but were fully focused on organizing and preparing all the necessary details for the event. There was a woman living nearby who often visited them to help with the organization and resolve current issues related to the preparations. She handed over the money and asked if they agreed that the performance would be closed and only for select participants. Everyone immediately took out bottles of water because they were very surprised by the offer and the seriousness of this woman's intentions. They told her that they still had a second section, and she said that she would add another 100,000 to ensure full comfort and preparation. This woman reported that all preparations were completed, and all that was left was to wait for the ritual to begin at the appointed time in the evening, so that everything would go well. The last team began preparing the tools, the sacrifice, and the musical accompaniment, not skimping on the instruments and details for the ritual. Let them take other acquaintances a little older who will be able to correctly and professionally carry out all the necessary actions for the success of the ritual. At that moment, a man stood with a briefcase in his hands, waiting for the signal and the moment to begin doing his part of the work. The man got out of the car and confidently headed to the right place where his colleagues were already waiting for further action. He then walked closer to the other man to hand over important documents and discuss the details of the upcoming operation. He looked inside the case and saw an old weapon that was supposed to be used in a ritual or for protection. He said that tomorrow they will definitely return these weapons after the opening of the exhibition, where these exhibits will be recognized as a national treasure and many will come to see them. The man asked if they had ever broken a promise and assured them that there was no need to worry as everything was under control and ready to be fulfilled. They then handed him money as a token of gratitude for his cooperation and confirmation of the seriousness of the intentions of all participants. The man said that everything was ready and now all that was left was to wait for the right moment to begin the important event. At that very moment, the Golden Cross Investment Building in Uido began to bustle with activity and preparations for the grand opening. The doors began to open, letting in guests and participants, and the atmosphere became increasingly tense and meaningful. Inside the building, preparations for the event had already begun in full swing, and all participants were busy with their duties carefully and responsibly. Chun Chiang could understand that this was where the main event would take place. Although he still didn't fully understand where he was, this is his stage for today, the place where he will have to show his abilities and pass an important testing stage. Chun Chiang couldn't tell if they wanted him to perform the real hex ritual right now or if this was just a test to check. The girl approached him decisively and confidently, showing that her decision was final and there was no turning back. She said that his test was beginning and much would depend on his actions in the future developments. She extended her hand, pointed at him, and clearly demanded that he curse the target without hesitation or doubt. Are they familiar with the app Sunjial Talk, which helps manage unwanted relationships and make communication with unpleasant people easier? In life, people inevitably encounter such people, communication with whom becomes difficult and tiring, causing stress and irritation. These can be different people, such as friends, bosses, or just acquaintances who take up a lot of energy and time. These may also be close relatives with whom you have to maintain relationships despite disagreements and conflicts. Sometimes these are even partners with whom an important part of life is connected, but communication with whom does not always bring joy and peace. You meet such people all the time, so it's enough to simply add them to this app to make your life easier. Their artificial intelligence bots will communicate for them, copying each person's style and speech as accurately and naturally as possible. And they will gently lead their relationship to a breakup, allowing them to avoid direct conflicts and negative emotions in communication. No more unnecessary emotions and stress associated with unnecessary conversations and empty discussions. And no fatigue from meaningless conversations that drain your energy and distract you from important matters. No burden of unwanted relationships that weighs you down and prevents you from living fully and freely. It was Sanjori Bot, a modern and effective solution for managing social connections. This is the perfect solution for a clean breakup without unnecessary drama and negative consequences. Kim Cha-jem from the company secretariat demonstrated the app to them and explained its benefits. Cheon Chi-sung was very surprised by how well thought out and functional this technological innovation was. He said it looked like an ad for some youth app that he doesn't use and that no one approaches, so why are they showing it to him? She replied that it was not just an app used by young people but something much more significant and in demand. It is wildly popular among Generation Z and already has over 6.5 million active users. This app has shown the fastest growth among all recent messengers and communication services. It is this application that is the subject of discussion and an important element of their plan. However, he believes that they have a poor understanding and apologized for his dissatisfaction and misunderstanding of the situation. The main thing is that she thanked him for his attention and for his detailed interest in this amazing technology, but still asked why he was shown it. And she explained that it happened exactly when he had just left and everything was connected with his participation in the test. Chun Chi-sung couldn't understand where this was all leading and what they really wanted from him. The girl repeated her own words to him that he must curse and perform the ritual without exception. They are going to perform a curse ritual to bring down their company's shares and thereby harm their competitors. This will be his test, which will show how ready and capable he is to handle the task. Chun Chi-sung began to carefully examine the tools and accessories prepared for the ritual. The man admitted that this did not look very convincing and agreed that he himself did not yet understand how to act. Cheon Ji-sung showed off his playlist on his broken phone, showing off his musical preferences to the group in attendance. He showed all this to a group of shamans and participants who were closely watching his actions. The man explained that a parent company was chosen for this guy which manages the application and monitors all processes. He recalled that yesterday's report showed that the number of users exceeded all expectations, which is why the company's shares soared by 33%. The question was asked whether this newcomer really thought he could stop the stock's rise, which seemed like sheer madness. He wants to compete with the best shamans in the city, but to do this, he needs to be able to do much more and be stronger than many of them. The girl warned that one should not underestimate his capabilities and potential because he can surprise everyone. His grandmother saved her when she was close to death by performing a ritual of pressure and healing. And spiritual power is transmitted through blood, so there is every chance that this guy is really a real and powerful shaman. The preparations are complete, and now it is time to begin the ritual at night in the city where everything should happen as quickly and efficiently as possible. Chun Chi-sung had completely changed his clothes and was holding a weapon in his hands, preparing for an important test. He didn't understand what kind of corporations were being run, but he felt the seriousness and scale of what was happening. The main character just stood there at that moment, focused and ready for anything that might happen. He didn't understand how to manage a ritual of such a scale, and this added to the tension and excitement. Cheon Chi-sung really didn't understand what was happening, but he knew he had to cope. His head was empty and he felt completely confused, but he tried to focus on the main thing. Of course he should be deleted because he is not a shaman but just a schoolboy who has never performed rituals and was not ready. They never perform rituals unless there are special conditions and minor reasons for retreating. And yet it was no longer possible to retreat because there was too much behind this to give up now without a fight and without trying. His reality is a path that cannot be missed or abandoned even if it is difficult and scary. Cheon Chi-sung decided to try his best to make something work out so that he could pass the test. He planted his feet on the floor, gathering his strength and focusing on the important task ahead of him. Then the guy suddenly jumped up as if trying to gather himself and tune into the right mood and rhythm. He immediately started playing despite all the doubts and difficulties, putting maximum effort into the process. Everyone present tried their best, watching and evaluating his every action with special attention and hope. They realized that he knew nothing about the ritual, and until that moment he had no idea that he would have to play under such difficult conditions. But despite all this, he continued, as if he sensed within himself the importance of what was happening and his duty. It was an ordinary guy who performed the ritual but did not feel its essence and depth at all. He just tried to pretend. He just pretended to try, but his actions remained superficial and lacking confidence. Even in this state, he could not keep up with the pace and expectations of those observing the ritual. They didn't care whether they were paid or not. The main thing was to complete the formalities and not be distracted by emotions. Something seemed to him that everything was going wrong, and he decided to add something of his own in order to somehow adapt to what was happening. The girl asked Mr. Chajem if he had goosebumps after the ritual began, if he felt anything unusual. The man replied that no, he did not feel any changes or unusual sensations at that moment. She asked whether the temperature in the room had changed even a little, since such changes could indicate the beginning of a magical process. The guy began to check all this, carefully observing the surrounding atmosphere and trying to catch the slightest changes. The temperature remained exactly 21 degrees, and there were no changes in the air or atmosphere. The man stated that it seemed like the guy had completely failed and was unable to complete the task. The girl glanced back, then quietly and imperceptibly began to walk away into the darkness of the night. She slowly approached the guy, expressing neither joy nor disappointment about the result. Chun Chiang turned to look at her, trying to understand her intentions and feelings. The girl looked at him carefully, as if assessing his determination and inner strength. Suddenly she hit him sharply with her club, stunning the guy with her action and unexpectedness. The main character was very surprised by such a sharp and unexpected action of the girl. He instantly dropped the weapon to the ground, unable to contain his surprise and shock. The main character could not understand what it was all about and why she did this to him. The girl began to ask with irritation what kind of antics he was doing and why he wasn't trying. She asked him to show what he was capable of and not to organize a children's party for money. The protagonist replied that he was performing the ritual exactly as she had requested and asked what to do next. There was no thirst to kill in his curse, only sincere albeit crooked anger and resentment. When he cursed the bastard who had bullied him, there was a crooked but sincere strength in his words. And now, under ideal conditions, he cannot even half express the hatred he felt then. It's a corporation, he has neither the experience nor the reason to curse it, so he can't put all his hatred into it. The girl said that he could do it, he just had to concentrate and imagine all his anger. She suggested imagining that all his hatred was gathering in one point and then bursting out. The main character asked what the word hatred means and how to feel it. She replied that it was a feeling of resentment towards his parents who abandoned him and left him alone. The main character did not immediately understand what exactly she was talking about and what it meant for him personally. It was the feeling of abandonment he experienced when he was in dire need of the care and support of his loved ones. He began to remember himself as a little boy, a helpless and lonely child. Powerlessness from the fact that I couldn't take care of the only person close to me, my grandmother. Constant anxiety and fear due to lack of money and lack of stability in life. Loneliness that arises from the inability to become close to peers due to past trauma. Hatred that was nurtured by years of abuse, contempt, and humiliation that he endured. And if that is not enough, let him add the humiliation he just experienced from her, and now let him curse. The main character began to feel anger inside himself and a thirst to show what he was capable of. Let him prove that he is worth something, because this chance could be the last one in his life. He was irritated by this woman who judged his life as if she knew everything about him, but what angered him most were her words full of truth. He himself wanted to prove his strength and seize this last chance without missing it. The protagonist sank down, focused and ready for action. The guy firmly decided that he was cursing them for real, putting all his heart and strength into it. The protagonist confidently pointed his weapon forward, preparing for the upcoming ritual without hesitation. The girl was very surprised and looked at him carefully at that very moment, not expecting such a turn of events. Chun Chiang looked at her in the same way, feeling a mixture of surprise and determination at the same time. She turned to the musicians and said that they had not yet fully understood how to play for the ritual. At this moment, all the musicians began to play, immersing themselves in the atmosphere created by the main character. The drummer and the rest of the band began to play in unison, setting the rhythm for the ritual. The main character looked intently somewhere ahead, completely immersed in the process and his thoughts. He realized that he had finally caught the right rhythm, which became the basis for the correct performance of the ritual. Not only did he have the rhythm, he could now confidently lead the band, directing their music and energy. Now he was at the head of this action, leading the musicians with confidence and strength in his heart. The main character began a real ritual, putting into it all his soul, will, and accumulated energy. Everyone around was very surprised at how powerful and sincere the ritual turned out to be despite the circumstances. The guy noticed that the air temperature had dropped sharply to 17 degrees, increasing the atmosphere and tension around. The girl carefully watched everything that was happening, trying not to miss a single detail or reaction of the main character. She looked at the guy, trying to figure out how far he could go and how the outcome of the whole test would change. At that moment, she saw the hero's grandmother, who was standing nearby watching him closely. She realized that a bud was beginning to bloom in front of her, symbolizing the awakening of new life and strength. The girl decided that she would be the one to make this bud open and awaken its hidden abilities. All the heavy fucking pain that had been building up inside him was finally about to burst out and be released. The main character released all the accumulated pain, as if freeing himself from internal tension and fear. In spring, everyone admires flowers, but no one notices the moment when the bud begins to open and blossom. The man could not understand why the girl suddenly burst into tears and anxiously asked her about the reason for her tears. If this is indeed the same bud that his hand touched, it will be a fateful event. The girl wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat because emotions overwhelmed her and prevented her from speaking. He involuntarily shed tears, feeling how something inside his soul was deeply touched and awakened in him. This guy will be the one who will turn Uido City upside down with his apparent strength and determination to fight against injustice. He will become a real nightmare for anyone who dares to stand in his way and interfere with his goals. The protagonist lowered his weapon to the ground, symbolizing the end of an old struggle and the beginning of a new chapter in life. He breathed heavily and looked ahead, focusing on the future that had yet to be built and changed. The protagonist saw many people in front of him, but gradually began to close his eyes, trying to focus on himself. He continued to look at them, feeling the full weight of responsibility and the importance of the upcoming actions for everyone. The protagonist then looked at his hands and realized that they were completely covered in fresh blood from the ritual. All his hands were covered in blood, symbolizing the price he paid to gain new strength and power. Then he suddenly raised his head up, realizing the full importance of the event happening around him. He looked carefully at all the people gathered inside the room, assessing their intentions and feelings. The main character suggested that everyone pay attention to the girl who played a key role in this ritual. At that moment, he saw his reflection full of doubts and internal rejection of what was happening. He sighed heavily and continued to look, trying to figure out what to do next in this situation. Suddenly, he noticed his grandmother in the reflection, looking at him with deep concern and warmth. The guy took a closer look to make sure it was really her and not an illusion. He continued to see his grandmother, who looked at him with genuine love and support. After this, Cheon Chisung suddenly fell to the floor, feeling weak and under great emotional stress. The girl began to worry about his condition and immediately went to him to help. Naturally, she ran towards him with all possible speed and maximum effort. She ran very fast, trying not to waste a second in order to provide assistance as quickly as possible. Soon she ran to him and carefully touched him, trying to understand what condition he was in. The main character was breathing heavily and trying to get up, but at that moment he decided to continue lying in place. The man also approached him and began to check his pulse to determine his state of health. He sat down next to her and looked at her in confusion, not knowing what exactly was going on or how to help the guy. The girl replied that he had hyperthermia and signs of anemia and asked to bring a burner and gauze from the utility room. The man immediately went to fulfill the girl's request to quickly help the main character with his condition. She told me to contact Hansalt Hospital, book a VIP room, and send an ambulance immediately. She also instructed to start cleaning, remove all traces, and monitor rumors and news on the app without delay. A thorough cleaning of the entire premises began to hide any signs of the ritual and events taking place. All items related to the ritual were carefully removed, so as not to leave any evidence. The musicians, as promised, were paid on time for their participation in the ritual and musical accompaniment. At the same time, the company's stock and app activity began to be monitored to assess the effects of the ritual. The main character was still lying on the girl's lap, trying to recover from the stress he had experienced. The girl calmed him down, asked him not to shake or panic, promising that everything would be fine. He slowly began to cope with the condition, trying to control his breathing and internal tension. Gyeonggi Province, Songnam City, Fanggi New Town is where the head office of the company associated with the app was located. At this time, the man was watching what was happening, clearly interested and closely following the situation. The man's name was Park Chawan, an important figure with great influence in the company and its affairs. There was a photograph of the main character on his desk indicating a close connection between them. This man was one of the founders of the company that was promoting the app and managing large investments. The man created the algorithms for the Songjal Talk app, which were responsible for the basic functions and user safety. Now he is in deep thought trying to understand the reasons for his confusion and alienation from the team. Lately he felt like he was losing touch not only with his team, but with everyone in the company despite his attempts to communicate. It felt like everyone was deliberately avoiding him, ignoring his messages, and trying not to engage in dialogue with him. Max, his senior colleague, wrote to apologize to the technical director, but their conversations did not go well and the atmosphere remained tense. He couldn't believe that he was blacklisted because he is one of the founders and the biggest contributor to the company's development. Despite his denial of the fact, he felt that this was exactly what was happening and it hurt his soul and pride. His own creation seemed to reject him, refusing to acknowledge his status and importance in the company. But this is his algorithm, his brainchild, and he had to feel every element and action of it. He could recognize any changes or deviations because the algorithm was created by his hands and heart. He pressed several buttons trying to access the internal settings and understand the reason for his alienation. For the application security, especially the blacklist, was the most important part, the basis of the entire system of protecting users and the company. Even though he created this mechanism, he had no right to view the lists and interfere with the operation of the program. If he had actually been blacklisted, it would have ruined his reputation and significantly worsened his position within the team. At that moment, the door suddenly opened, interrupting his thoughts and the silence in the room. A hand appeared from the doorway and suddenly reached out to him, causing him shock and confusion. The hand grabbed him sharply by the shoulder, causing him to flinch and turn around to see what was happening. After this, someone suddenly hit the man in the back, causing him to lose his balance and flinch. The push in his back was so strong that the man felt his body suddenly shake and lean forward. What pushed him turned out to be a demon overseer summoned by the protagonist's ritual to protect and watch over him. The man was very surprised and stunned by this sudden appearance, not understanding what exactly was happening around him. At that moment, he received an important notification on his phone that could change the situation dramatically. The man looked closely at the message, trying to understand what was written there and how serious it was. Suddenly, he could not bear the emotions and simply burst into tears, realizing the full gravity of what was happening and his own helplessness. Meanwhile, the main character was in the hospital, lying in bed and recovering from the stress and ritual he had experienced. The girl watched him closely without looking away and worried about his condition and health. She took out her phone to contact the right people and inform them about the situation that had just happened. At that moment, someone's phone rang, breaking the silence and attracting the attention of everyone in the room. The guy reached for the ringing phone, intending to answer it and find out who was trying to contact him at such an important moment. It was Justin Lee, the CEO of Golden Cross Investments, asking if the director was still in touch. In English, he said that it was still too early for important decisions and discussions and that patience was needed. She asked him if money had ever been expected or if he wasn't going to earn it simply because it was too early to start. He replied that if we are talking about money, then this is a completely different conversation and we need to think about it seriously. After that, he immediately pushed the girl who was lying next to him, as if demanding her attention and reaction. He asked what was going on and what was going on because the situation had become too tense and confusing for everyone present. She said that as soon as the market opens, one should immediately start shorting the app shares without any delay or hesitation. He was surprised that stocks were chosen for such a risky move and asked why them. He logged into the system to carefully study the current performance and dynamics of the company's shares in real time. He then asked her if she was really sure that this decision was the right one because such operations can be very dangerous. Although no, he thought that was stupid because she wouldn't call him so early without a firm belief in the plan. He asked how much free cash the company currently had since many assets had already been invested in other projects and it needed to be checked quickly. At this time, she was in the ward next to the main character, carefully observing his condition and waiting for the result. He replied that there were approximately 8 billion available funds that could be allocated for this operation, but no more. She looked at the figures in surprise and stated that this volume was not enough for their plans and ambitious goals. Then he started shouting and indignantly asking how 8 billion could be considered a small amount since it was a huge amount of money for one short position. He emphasized that this is not 800 million but a whole 8 billion, which is more than enough for a successful deal and investment. And anyway, he hasn't given his consent yet because these 8 billion are the maximum that the company can allocate now, and shorting shares with such a high risk is too dangerous even at her request. Let them use another 2 billion from her annual bonus. This time, the commission will be from 7.5% to 10%, which will greatly affect the final profit of the transaction. He began to think that before him was a money-obsessed witch capable of even burning her own bonus for her own selfish purposes. Or she finally found that very talented person she had been looking for so long to realize her plans. He said that he was going into battle and was already starting to buy up profitable positions in the market in order to gain a foothold there for a long time. He added that if he lost too much energy, money would stop sticking to him, so it was better to hold back for the sake of fame and a crowd of women. Always with his quirks, and next to him there seems to be a female voice that doesn't allow him to concentrate and interferes with his work. After that, the guy simply threw the girls in different directions, showing that now was not the time for entertainment and distractions. He told them to get lost because now was the time to make money and focus on the main task. It was already morning and the girl stood at the window watching the dawn and a new day with new hopes. She said that dawn began at the very moment when the main character began to come to his senses and realize what was happening. At this moment, the main character began to come to his senses, not understanding where he was but remembering that he was performing a ritual. The guy tried to understand where he was now and what was happening to him, trying to collect his thoughts and come to his senses. At that moment, he noticed something unusual that immediately caught his attention and aroused his interest. He saw a girl who came out of the shower and slowly approached him as if she wanted to say or explain something. She said that he was in the hospital and would not be going anywhere later, causing Cheon Ji-sung to be surprised and ask why she was naked. She replied that the bathroom had an expensive bathtub and bidet that they had spent a lot of money on, and she had to use them but quickly get dressed. She asked if he knew what time it was because it was important for understanding what was happening and his further actions. The protagonist asked what time it was, and she replied that it was 9 in the morning, the opening time of the stock market, when the big day began. She added that this is also the time when, according to her, his fate should change and a new stage in the hero's life will begin. The girl turned on the TV to watch the news and find out the latest events related to the market and the fate of the company. She turned on the news channel, and at that moment important news related to the fall of stocks began to appear on the screen. She saw that the company's shares began to fall, which caused alarm and concern among everyone who followed the market situation. But the moment when his fate was supposed to change, which the woman spoke of, never came, and everything remained the same. Instead, there was an oppressive and burdensome silence that seemed to hang over everyone present in the room. Shares fell just 7%, which was significantly less than expected and surprised many. The protagonist asked if this meant that something was going wrong and that the plans could fail completely. She replied that the shares of the company they cursed were not falling at all, but on the contrary continued to grow confidently. At that moment, a man entered the room, clearly concerned about the situation and wanting an explanation. He was sure that everyone was watching the situation closely because the board of directors was demanding immediate reports and explanations. He also added that if he had to close a position with losses, all responsibility would fall entirely on the main character. The main character was very surprised by such words and did not know how to react to them correctly. She replied that she had earned as she had planned, and everyone present felt it, including the main character. Let him tell the board of directors to wait calmly. The stock rally shows no signs of slowing down, and if the trend continues on Thursday and Friday, the company's losses will only increase. She reported that she had brought the company significant profits, and her percentage of successful deals had reached a whopping 82%. She suggested that stocks would fall further and continue to fall until the close of trading, causing panic among investors. Let him hand over all the losses to her. She promised to return the money to the last drop, even sold her property, so there is no need to worry. The main character had a very hard time breathing, and this condition worried everyone around him. He did exactly as she said, and now it seems he shouldn't bear any responsibility for the consequences. But what is her confidence based on if there are so many doubts and uncertainties about what is happening around her? There was a constant struggle between doubt and confidence inside, creating tension in their every word and action. The girl, meanwhile, had already put out a bunch of cigarettes, expressing her inner excitement and fatigue from this whole situation. Their collision created an even more oppressive and painful silence, which was unexpectedly broken a moment later. At this point, a candle appeared on the chart which clearly showed that the quotes began to rapidly fall downwards. Then a few more candles followed, and the chart dropped sharply, causing panic among everyone present. This candle was very long and huge, symbolizing the scale and suddenness of the market collapse that was taking place. The protagonist asked if the stocks were really falling, not believing his eyes and trying to comprehend the situation. The girl realized that it was at this moment that the long-awaited epic collapse began, which everyone feared but waited for. The epic collapse of Sunjialteik stocks began with a massive sell-off of shares by insiders on the stock market. Shares have already fallen 11% in a short period of time, causing concern among investors. Everyone was in shock and did not understand what exactly was happening to their investments in such a rapid decline. Previously, there was a 7% rise, and no one could understand how the stocks began to fall so sharply so quickly. There were rumors on the company's website that many users were getting rid of shares without explanation or reason. Some man suggested that everyone carefully watch the news, which reported that the Chinese were copying their app. One of the developers created a website where you could check who had blacklisted you, and the news quickly spread. Users and investors began visiting the site en masse to find out the truth about the situation with the app. The site published lists of users who had unsubscribed from the app, causing heated discussion online. This news spread with great speed and attracted the attention of almost everyone who was connected to the application. The information was read by everyone from ordinary users to professional analysts and journalists. Park Chawan, one of the app's original developers, buried his brainchild with his own hands that day and fled abroad. The man turned off his phone and, disappointed by what had happened, decided to completely disconnect from his work and team. After this, he simply threw the phone into the trash bin, demonstrating his extreme despair and disappointment. It was the revenge of a programmer betrayed by those closest to him, using the services he had put his whole soul into. Zaidam began to investigate the mass exodus of users from the application, analyzing the causes and scale of the problem. Users deleted the app en masse immediately after news of the crisis and mass outflow was published. Both politicians and military personnel removed the app, fearing the consequences of using the service in their circles. Many hoped that deleting their account would clear their usage history and began deleting their profiles en masse, nearly 1 million people on the day of the incident. Shares of the app that managed the most delicate human relationships completely lost confidence and fell for 3 trading days in a row without stopping. As a result, the shares turned into real toilet paper, losing almost all of their value and significance in the market. This job was the protagonist's first at Uido, where he encountered the harsh realities of business and technology. The protagonist asked himself whether he had managed to pass the test of fate or whether he was still at the beginning of a difficult path. Even if the girl has prepared the perfect scene for him, there is still a lot to prove and overcome in the future. With just one ritual, he was able to destroy an entire company, which spoke of the incredible power and consequences of his actions. But it didn't end there. Not only one business but an entire industry was destroyed. It brought down the entire sector, causing a chain reaction that shook the market and made everyone think. Now this was no longer just a talented newcomer. This was a real monster capable of changing the rules of the game. Moreover, it was a monster that literally printed money, turning the crisis to its own advantage. The girl said that he was accepted into the team with honor, and he was recognized as an excellent student among other shamans. The protagonist exhaled heavily upon hearing these words, realizing the full responsibility and scale of the work ahead. She welcomed him to the world of the Uido shamans and added something important that would change his future destiny. Let him stop calling her "Hey you" or "that one." From now on she is called Mrs. Timjong, and it is important to respect that. They will see and hear her very often because she will become a key figure in their future business. The senior artist is already preparing his masterpiece, and a generous reward for the work done awaits him. Also, after completing the case with the application, the main character was showered with numerous rewards and bonuses. And these were not just symbolic gifts or words of gratitude. Everything was much more serious. The amounts of money he received exceeded anything he could have previously dreamed of in his wildest fantasies. The main character was literally dazzled by all this wealth and unexpected success around him. The girl said that this was now his employer and suggested that he greet him politely. The protagonist asked if this man was their new shaman who would lead their team. He hoped that there would be no problems due to his minority, otherwise it was unclear why she brought him to the director. The thought flashed through his mind that it might be her tribe or someone from her inner circle. He had a lot of business cards in his vest which he handed out at meetings and business events. He was pleased to meet the company's CEO in person and to feel the importance of this moment. His recent performance made a strong impression on the protagonist and inspired him to take further action. It would be an honor for him to work with such a person and learn everything he needed from him. Maybe we should skip the formalities. He's still just a puppy and doesn't understand such formalities yet. Justin Lee asked if they would get straight to the point so as not to waste time on idle talk. He then clapped his hands to get the attention of everyone present and begin the formal part of the meeting. At that moment, some girl came in and immediately went to the table with papers. She left her bag on the table, not paying attention to what was happening around her. The main character immediately picked up the bag and carefully placed it on the table, showing his attentiveness. Justin said the amount was 500 million and that was just the beginning of their future deal. More precisely, the amount is 543920000, and he suggested checking this data for accuracy. The protagonist asked again why he needed to know such details but realized that it was important for the case. She said that the money belonged to him and he asked what exactly she meant. He then asked if she hadn't transferred 300,9000 via mobile banking to pay for the ritual. She replied that this amount was an hourly rate which was a commission for the rituals performed. She explained that this was his rightful share of the profits earned through his magical rituals. There would be no problems. $500 million was real money and he could hardly believe that it was now his. The girl sighed heavily, realizing how unusual and difficult it was for him to accept such an impressive sum of money. She handed him a bag of money and said that if he didn't want it he could just give it to her. The main character immediately grabbed the bag and began confidently saying that he would definitely take this money for himself. He tried to explain why he had such a reaction. He had never held so much money in his entire life. It's just that in his entire life, he had never even held such an impressive sum in his hands. The main character began to mentally calculate, trying to understand the reality of what was happening and the scale of the sum. He remembered how he had humiliated himself before because he didn't have even 1/100th of this money. It took him some time to gradually get used to the idea of having such large financial resources. She told him not to worry and to begin to get used to his new level of capabilities and resources. She and their company promised to help him make 100 times more money if he trusted them completely. Of course, Chun Chiang believed her after such words and was ready to follow their instructions without any doubts. The CEO said he had signed a contract that the rituals would only be performed with them. If someone tries to lure him away without offering the same amount, let them think about betrayal themselves. After that, they simply left the office without wasting time on unnecessary conversations or discussions. She said he had received money he had never seen before and didn't know where to spend it. The girl asked him what exactly he was planning to spend this suddenly large sum of money on. At that moment, they were in a restaurant and Chun Chiang remembered his grandmother inviting her along with him. He suggested that she move to a nursing home where she would be looked after by professionals and provided with comfort. The boss said that this house is very expensive but of high quality, where she will be washed, fed, and treated for dementia. She asked if they would feed her on time there because at home they fed her 5 times a day with snacks. He replied that they would go there tomorrow. It was not far from their home and he would be able to visit her every day. The grandmother looked at him carefully, as if trying to understand the true intentions and thoughts of her interlocutor. She said he was talking nonsense and suggested he focus on frying the meat. Chun Chiang said that her suffering has finally come to an end and she can now rest. Now the girl could calmly rest, gain strength, and prepare for new challenges. She explained that everything that happened was an expression of sentimentality and emotional vulnerability at that moment. The man noted that this guy seemed pretty good and was not like other famous shamans. She expressed hope that he would not lose his strength too quickly and would be able to make great progress in the matter. Strangely enough, she really liked him, although she couldn't explain the reason for such sympathy. At the same time, an atmosphere of calm and tense anticipation of important events reigned in the VIP room. There was a large variety of drinks there intended for guests of the highest level and status. One of those present carefully held a glass of red wine in his hands, which shimmered in the light. It was Park Soo who held the top position at Ozen Finance, a company located in the Ilsendorn district of Lee Tiha. A girl unexpectedly approached him, immediately attracting his attention with her mysterious and confident appearance. She quietly whispered something in his ear, trying not to attract unnecessary attention from the guests in the room. He asked if the app's share price drop meant that shamans were involved, including newcomers to the business. The situation became more and more interesting and aroused growing interest among all those present. The next morning, he took his grandmother to a nursing home to ensure she received the proper care and attention. The 2-year plan cost $70 million, which he planned to pay by bank transfer or credit card. He held the complete drawing in his hands, neatly folded into his bag, preparing for further action. He then began to take money out of his bag, preparing to make the necessary payment. The man said that he would pay all the remaining funds and asked that the amount be transferred as a loan to her account. He promised not to enroll his grandmother in any paid programs, including dementia treatment and other procedures. The remaining money after paying for 2 years of living in a nursing home was carefully calculated. The total amount was $440 million, intended for further expenses and provision. The guy naturally couldn't believe what was happening because it seemed like an incredible and strange event to him. At that moment, the girl was already waiting for him, showing patience and slight excitement at the same time. He never had that kind of money because he had no idea how or what to spend it on. Chun Chiang got into the car, but they didn't leave right away, lingering there for a few minutes. She asked if he had already thought about where exactly he planned to spend the remaining money in the future. The chief said that it all started for him with a search for housing in an area that could be demolished at any moment, and this is alarming. She asked what else, and he replied that he could put the money in the bank, but that would cause big problems. If money in the amount of $400 million ends up in the account of a minor, the Financial Supervision Authority will immediately begin an investigation. My opinion is that before she does anything stupid, she will have to teach him how to spend money wisely. The boss asked if he knew of any way to spend them, to which she replied that there might not be a way to earn them, but there was always a way to spend them. She told the man that they would travel along a route that she would now name and explain in detail. The man began to drive them somewhere without words, without asking any unnecessary questions or doubts. They set off on their journey, following his steering wheel and making their way along unfamiliar roads. Later they arrived at a place where they could see a beautiful and well-kept house with a spacious yard. Chun Chiang began to look around as he entered the room and carefully studied the interior around him. She told him to just live here and she would help with the deposit, not too fancy but comfortable for one person. It is especially important to take into account his attentiveness, stress, and mood swings, as this is also physically exhausting. Once he has finished with the housing, he will then take the same money to the psychiatrist to receive the necessary medical care. Chun Chiang decided that he would stay here then, and they did not immediately push the furniture and rearrange things. They started going shopping, buying furniture and interior items to make their new home cozy and comfortable. The Alley Inn in Sand was the place where they looked for various things for the house and suitable furniture for the room. The antique shop turned out to be one of those places where you could find unique and valuable items for your interior. It was impossible to buy ritual tools every time, so a different approach to this issue was needed. Even in special cases when it was necessary to obtain weapons, they bribed someone, but the main thing was to have their own main thing. At that moment, they did not go inside the building, limiting themselves to just looking around from the outside and discussing it. The man looked at them, carefully assessing the situation and the intentions emanating from the people present. There was a strong aura around the guy which gave him a mysterious and unusual energetic aura. He realized that the girl had come again on some dangerous business connected with unpleasant and risky circumstances. She told the old man that his intuition was correct, immediately realizing that he was casting a spell or some other evil. The man asked what price she was asking for this and how much such a service would cost. She replied that the price was $100 million, which seemed too high to many. Chun Chiang was surprised, but the girl explained that the weapon would last a long time, so the price was justified. The man calmly asked them to wait a little, saying that he only needed 1 minute. After that, he brought a heavy ladder and without further ado began to climb up somewhere. Having reached the very top, he carefully took out an old but sturdy box. Then he slowly turned around and showed them the contents of the box. Inside were various weapons, among which one looked especially impressive and unusual. Chun Chiang slowly extended his hand, as if he wanted to touch this very object. After a short pause, he lifted it resolutely high above his head, feeling its weight and shape. It was his first personal weapon which now belonged to him unconditionally and forever. The man told him to use it with extreme caution and allowed him to pet it for a short time. The girl calmly asked how much money he had left after his last purchase. Chun Chiang showed her the remaining amount and said that there was about that much left. She replied that 150 million should be enough. Chun Chiang asked Liana if she wanted to buy anything else or if it would be better to borrow this amount in advance just in case. She answered without hesitation that without investing large amounts of money nothing could be earned and asked not to argue and to continue investing. The main one, summing up, asked what they were now planning to invest this impressive amount of money in. She confidently stated that she would now invest in people because they are the ones who bring real value. And among all the potential candidates, there was one particularly important one that was worth highlighting first. The first person to be hired without delay was an experienced shaman's assistant with the necessary skills. This man had much more experience than he did because he was just a beginner in this difficult matter, so he could not only turn to him for advice but also count on his help in preparing everything necessary for the ritual so that he could focus exclusively on imposing damage. And the most important thing was that if the ritual dragged on, it could be used as insurance and support, especially before meetings. Rehun, the 28-year-old fairy Mephistopheles, coldly stated that she had no intention of participating in this. Even though she may look tired and broken now, not long ago she was the adopted daughter of Master Tommen himself. She was considered the best student of one of the main experts in curse rituals in all of Korea, and that's a fact. And now she is being offered to serve some representative of a clan and tribe without status and patron who has not even been here for a week. She said that despite what was happening, she was still managing to get things done and living well here. The girl asked ironically, since when did extracting money from girls using a cheap website become called a business? The contract was for 2 years and the bonus under the terms of the offer was 50 million in cash. The minimum annual salary was set at 200 million. And upon completion of the contract a separate sanctuary would be built for him. Moreover, it was supposed to be located in the prestigious Gangnam area, which in itself was impressive. At that moment Chun Chiang made a strange face, as if he didn't quite understand how to react to this. The girl slowly began to open the bag with money, and Rakin was genuinely surprised to see such an impressive amount there. The same girl added that although this guy seems like a crook, if he helps her with him, it will definitely benefit her career. Being the assistant of Uido's worst nightmare sounded scary, but at the same time tempting. The girl silently lowered her head, immersed in her own thoughts and doubts. After a short pause, she told them to try to take care of him with more dedication and attention. The next decision in the team had to be made immediately because delay could be costly. This concerned Choi Tae-ho, a former military commander of the Koryong group, who noted that he had arranged the meeting at their request, but had been assigned a schoolboy as his bodyguard, which he found offensive. She approached him and informed him that the offer bonus was 10 million in cash, full benefits package, and an annual salary of 8 million after taxes. After that, he changed dramatically and even began to carry the guy on his shoulders as if he were his comrade in arms. And finally, there was one last participant connected with music whom they could not ignore. At that moment, he was backstage, where everything around was permeated with the atmosphere of preparation for the performance. He was signing something hastily without even looking up from the documents. Chun Chiang had a hard time understanding what they were doing here and why they were starting all this. He still didn't fully understand what the ritual was, but he felt that it was something special. He admitted that he was so delighted that he could not find the right words. Money was nice, of course, but there was more to working with him, and he genuinely felt like he inspired them to create new songs. They both looked into each other's eyes for a second, as if trying to figure out what was coming next. He expressed hope for future cooperation, believing that together they could achieve much. The girl replied that the team was now almost complete and the company would provide her with the missing people, so if necessary she should let her know right away. Chun Chiang clenched his fist and sincerely thanked her for everything she had done for him. The girl slowly brought the cigarette to her lips, doing so with a slight theatrical manner. She said that his success is also her income because every successful ritual brings her a commission. Therefore, according to her, there is no need to thank her for every little thing because in this business everything is mutually beneficial. He was about to go to his old house, hoping to pick up the things that remained there. The protagonist replied that yes, he really needed to go back there and collect everything. Chun Chiang was convinced that something like this simply could not happen to his house. A terrible fire broke out on the site where his house used to be, leaving only ashes. His house burned down completely, leaving not a single intact wall behind. Everyone who was nearby remained in their places, making no attempt to help during the fire. At that moment, something ominous about a demon with an eye was written on the fence next to the ruins. Chun Chiang was so amazed that he couldn't believe his eyes and thoughts. He clenched his fist in rage, not knowing how to deal with the emotions that were overwhelming him. She asked him if he knew who did it, and he replied that it was the work of Kim Jae-hyun and his gang who had been cruelly abusing him. At that moment, Chun Chiang even began to cry, unable to contain his feelings and the pain of loss. The things that held memories of his grandmother remained there, and he never managed to take anything from there. The girl suggested dancing the sword dance again, since today was the first time he had gathered his team. He now had real support and was no longer alone on this journey. Therefore, it was necessary to perform the sword dance one more time as a symbol of the beginning of a new stage. The building he lived in was very old, and it eventually burned to the ground, and since it was a slum on a hill, the firefighters got there very late. Overall, he felt genuinely sorry for everything that had happened, and a feeling of guilt was gripping him from within. After a brief inspection, the firefighters left the scene without finding anything that could be saved. Chun Chiang was left in the ashes, completely alone, surrounded by memories and silence. He looked down at his hand, feeling the tension and anger pulsating inside him. He was determined that he would never again allow himself to endure humiliation and pain, because he finally realized that he was no longer a nobody, no longer a defenseless, despised object. At that very moment, a car drove up to them and new team members got out of it. The commander stated that a full package and salary level would be provided as in a serious company. The girl asked if the ritual would really be performed right there, since all their clothes were wet. They were told the situation was explained to them, saying that their employer was physically unable to change plans at the moment. Chun Chiang recalled how he was cruelly bullied in class during his school years. They hit him hard against his own desk, not even giving him the chance to defend himself. He remembered sitting alone away from all the other students. Just like now, this group of people burned down his house, destroying everything that was dear to him. Everyone present listened to his story with surprise and attention without interrupting. Then they saw Chun Chiang clutching his combat weapon in his hands. He said that if any of them were not ready to help with the ritual of damage to a person, then they could leave. He could handle it himself. The man came up and confidently stated that he does everything he is paid for. This is his life principle. The girl replied that setting fire to the house of a shaman who had broken both of his legs was an act bordering on suicide. He said he was tired of putting up with it and promised to play something truly emotional for him. Chun Chiang looked at each of those present, testing their resolve, and they without hesitation began to prepare for the upcoming ritual with complete seriousness. The photograph had already been prepared and was hanging on a special wooden pig for rituals. Everything was almost ready, only the final touches remained before the ritual. One of the participants said loudly, "The thread of life breaks, the blood runs cold in the veins. Flesh turned to grave dust." The following spell sounded in the silence. The last word that concluded the ritual was short and cold. Chun Chiang confidently spread his arms, allowing the magic to flow beyond his body. After this, he released all the accumulated anger that had been languishing in his soul for years. At that moment, someone was racing along the highway, unaware of the impending nightmare. These were the very same people who had once cruelly bullied Chun Chiang. One guy asked another if he was sure he could handle the aftermath of the ritual, and if he was afraid of the police if something happened at some barn in the reconstruction area. Another replied that even if they steal, the police won't do anything to them because his father knows all the right people. He added that Chizen himself said that it was that demon with the eye that crippled his legs, and if it really was damaged, then the consequences would be serious. If Chizen dares to break anything else, he will have to answer for it. He threatened to simply kill him if he suffered at his hands even once more. Then he added that maybe he was just scared and demanded that he shut up since he was driving a motorcycle. At that moment, a huge truck suddenly appeared on the road, blocking the way. The driver was irritated by how carelessly they drove on the night roads. He was angry that they were running around at night without fear, without thinking about the consequences. At that moment, the man continued driving without slowing down and not expecting any obstacles. Then he noticed something strange right in front of him on the dark road. He was very surprised because he did not expect to see anyone in this place. Before him stood a terrifyingly scary woman, as if she had come out of a nightmare. The man instinctively began to dodge her, trying to avoid a collision. His movement was abrupt, and the car veered off the road almost instantly. The guys driving behind saw the overturned car and didn't have time to react. Many of them fell to their deaths without ever realizing what had happened to them. One of the guys had a hard time comprehending what was going on and how it all turned out. At that moment, he suddenly noticed something that dramatically changed his expression. He noticed his legs covered in bruises and wounds which seemed almost immobile. He didn't understand where they had disappeared to, leaving her in such a state, and hoped that someone would help her as soon as possible. Then, for some reason, Chisen's attention suddenly switched and focused on the details that had previously eluded his gaze. He saw his friend lying lifeless and motionless, and his heart sank with horror and despair. He realized that he urgently needed to call the emergency service 119 to get help and save his friend. The phone was very far away, and Cheon Chisung desperately tried to reach it, overcoming pain and fear. The guy crawled with all his might through the mud and rocks, trying to reach out to the treasured device. It turned out that his legs were pinned down by something heavy, and attempts to break free only caused unbearable pain. At that very moment, something or someone began to slowly approach him from the darkness. He screamed, trying to find out if there was anyone nearby who could help him in this terrible situation. The creature continued to approach, making no sound, like a shadow emerging from a nightmare. The guy saw the creature's head in front of him and felt a chill run down his spine from horror. The creature smiled a sinister, frightening smile and stared straight at him with cold eyes. The guy tried to explain that this man was not his enemy and asked the creature not to come closer. He pulled out a cross and, calling out loud to God, demanded that the demon disappear immediately. He declared that he was the pastor's son, and that Anna was unclean and had no right to be near him. The boy loudly demanded that the creature leave him and disappear once and for all. At that moment, the creature extended its hand and began to bend his cross with force, as if trying to destroy the protection. Then the creature suddenly disappeared right before his eyes, leaving behind a feeling of cold and emptiness. The guy immediately realized that this was the work of someone who had been threatening and stalking him for a long time. He began to chase the main character, intending to take revenge for old grievances and humiliations. That very day, he killed the scoundrel who had cruelly bullied and tormented him since elementary school. Although there was no feeling of guilt, there remained an unpleasant aftertaste and a dark foreboding inside. Cheon Chisung stood in the bathroom, looking at his reflection and trying to collect his thoughts. At that moment, it seemed to him that a dead guy was standing right behind him and watching his every move. He felt as if his hands were stained with stinking blood, as if he could not wash away the guilt and dirt of the past. He swore that no one would poison him anymore, that he would not have to cast a mortal curse for protection. Cheon Chisung sat down on the bed, took a deep breath, and tried to find the strength to move on. He then dialed someone important and got straight to the point without further delay. Someone on the other end picked up the phone, and a voice immediately responded to his request. Chun Chiang approached Ms. Timjang, asking her to give him as much work and opportunities as possible. She agreed to his request, promising to support and help him with difficult tasks. She said she would load him with tasks so much that he would even develop an aversion to work. The trading corporation he was to work for was called Coma, and it was powerful. The shipping business he was supposed to oversee belonged to a company called Solomon. The studio, which was associated with projects and creativity, was called Tolstoy and was famous for its professionalism. It didn't matter to him which company would entrust the case as long as the work was serious and profitable. His job was to bring down the stocks of companies he encountered along the way, destroying any value they had. They all worked in a coordinated manner, like a single mechanism where each one performed their part without fail. And naturally, no one could stop this team, which was constantly increasing its influence. Every stock in a company they touched immediately fell sharply in price and lost investor confidence. At that time in Uido, such operations were called marriage with death because they were so destructive. At this point, a huge number of bags could be seen filled with money ready for distribution. The CEO extended his hand to the guy, confirming his trust and inviting reliable allies to the team. They received billions in commission, which was an impressive indicator of their successful work. Of course, the guy didn't take all the money for himself. Part of the funds went towards the development and needs of the team. He said that he had not worked for 2 months, but he had the right attitude for new achievements. This work was much more profitable than searching for runaway wives or petty fraud. The guy asked if he could really take that amount and if he could have his name officially recorded. The girl simply looked at him in surprise, not expecting such a serious and decisive question. Then she slowly stubbed out her cigarette, placing it in the ashtray with a slight sigh of relief. She looked at him and asked what would happen to her and her future destiny. Chun Chiang asked for more money to be allocated to him to carry out the upcoming tasks. She replied that they really needed money because even if they had it, there was always a shortage. Chun Chiang knew that she was a real money demon who knew how to count every penny. He noted that since she is tens of times richer than him, rich people do not always need gratitude. Offended, she said that she understood everything and began to slowly walk towards the exit. The protagonist tried to grab her hand, wanting to stop her and explain the situation. He said she had a lot more money than he did, so gratitude probably didn't make sense. The protagonist grabbed the bag tightly as if trying to hold on to his last hopes. However, he still wanted to thank her, so he decided to buy her a gift as a token of his appreciation. He told the salesman that the girl probably already had all the classic watch models and advised her to choose this option, which could be exchanged if she didn't like it. The main character anxiously awaited the girl's reaction, hoping that she would like the gift. She put the watch on her wrist and examined it carefully in the dim light. The girl looked at her watch and quietly said that it was quite good and she was pleased about it. The protagonist smiled, feeling satisfaction from her compliment and acceptance of the gift. He then told the man that he had a present for him too. He thought he might like some sunglasses. The girl looked at the main character with interest and a slight smile, observing his behavior. He noticed that despite the money he had earned, he had not bought himself a single thing, not even a pair of shoes. Even shoes seemed to be a necessity, but he put it off until later, continuing to work. It was only after he started earning money that his generosity towards others grew significantly and became noticeable. He didn't get cocky, he didn't change overnight, and he didn't try to influence those around him aggressively. This guy will definitely go far in life because he had the right attitude and goals. She invited everyone to go for a drink, saying that she was treating them and wanted to celebrate their successes. Everyone looked at her in surprise, not expecting such an unexpected offer from her. The man picked up a glass at the bar, wiping it with his hand before taking his first sip. They went to a nice bar with a cozy atmosphere where they could relax and talk. There was significantly less food left on the table than there was initially because the company had eaten and drunk well. The main character said goodbye to the musician, thanking him for his cooperation and exchange of experience. The girl looked at the main character with embarrassment, trying to figure out how best to express her feelings. Then she walked over and stood right next to him, feeling a little nervous and hesitant. She asked if everyone had already left to find out if they were alone in the room. The main character said that the shaman Uido caused a commotion in the women's restroom because she was very nauseous, and Taeho Hyun went to see her off. But she could not resist expensive alcohol despite her poor condition and warnings. Accordingly, she really felt bad and needed the support and care of those around her. The man said that he would take her there and then return to give the protagonist a ride so he could wait in peace. The guys from the group and Nuna went to their place to modestly continue the evening in a more relaxed atmosphere. The girl said that they were all weaklings, and the main character replied that he had finished off the head, so he felt fine. The girl drank champagne, and at that moment the atmosphere became a little more relaxed and trusting. She said it was better that way because she had just had a personal conversation with the main character. The main character began to feel embarrassed and could not understand what exactly she was talking about. The girl explained that it was about work and that he seemed to be hoping for something else with his facial expression. Chun Chiang said that of course he thought the conversation would be about work because it was logical and expected. He asked what else they talked about: rituals, successful stocks that fall according to plan, and well-coordinated teamwork. She agreed that he was right and that things were going well in the party despite some difficulties. The problem was that his name became known, and this had certain consequences. Financial circles dubbed him the sudden death shaman, and this caused real hysteria among competitors. And the fact that they were now beginning to be wary of him meant that they would call in other shamans to contain him and his company. The guy didn't immediately understand what exactly this meant, but he felt that the situation was becoming more dangerous. The goal was to either protect the company's shares from being damaged or to suppress its influence and push the stock back up. This means that the best shaman will come to them and perform a counter-ritual directed against him. Chun Chiang was silent for a while, thinking about what he had heard and trying to understand the implications. At the same time, some man was in a spacious hall immersed in his thoughts and affairs. It was a colonel and head of strategy at Fibonacci Capital named Kim Yoon-suk. Someone reported that Golden Cross had opened a short position on a stock that the company had been working with for several months in a row. Since he knew that the company also had a full-time team, the man was surprised why they turned to them for help. The man replied that they also had shamans, but their enemy was the shaman of sudden death, dangerous and powerful. This aroused Kim Yoon-suk's obvious interest, and he asked what exactly the title of sudden death shaman meant. The man began listing stocks that had begun to plummet across the industry, explaining that the shaman was responsible for the decline. He admitted that they are afraid of such shamans because their regular forces cannot cope with them, so they came to ask for help. He approached Mr. Ilsen Torin with a request to perform at least one blessing ritual for other shares in order to stabilize the situation. Torin apologized, saying that he only took on cases with a guaranteed result and only projects that had a significant impact on Ozen's quarterly results. He noted that they are partners of the company and have carried out many projects together, so it is difficult for him to refuse the request. But in return, he can lend them one of his skilled shamans who can help in a difficult situation. The man was puzzled, not understanding what a skilled shaman meant, and asked for a more detailed explanation of the term. The shaman began to slowly walk towards them inside the hall, carrying with him an aura of confidence and strength. He held his weapon in his hands as if preparing for an important and responsible mission. People literally held his belly, realizing how great his weight and strength were at the same time. The shaman confidently walked up to them, arousing respect and even slight fear among those present. He breathed heavily, trying to remain calm before the serious work began. The man watched the shaman with surprise and interest, assessing his physical strength and character. This shaman was a very large and rather obese man, which contrasted with his strength and determination. He extended his hand in greeting, demonstrating confidence and willingness to cooperate. It was the staff shaman of the Ozen Finance Company named Kumchin Bosal, real name Kong Yonghwa. At this time, in another building, a completely different scene of events was unfolding, full of tension and anticipation. It was a restaurant called the Red Flag, known for its fine cuisine and rich atmosphere. At that moment, the shaman was sitting calmly at the table and enjoying his meal. All the restaurant staff worked hard to feed this shaman, trying to satisfy his appetite. He kept pouring various drinks into himself, keeping up his energy for the upcoming work. There was a huge amount of food, and the shaman greedily consumed it without stopping. Every second, new dishes were brought directly to his table, and he did not have time to eat. The man at the next table was eating meat, watching this unusual process with surprise. The girl sitting next to him was amazed at how quickly the shaman managed to eat such a quantity of food. She explained that the kitchen was on the verge of collapse due to the number of orders from the VIP room, which only had 3 people. She wondered how 3 people could eat so much and thought they were probably food bloggers. She clarified that there is one person, a shaman, who devours all the dishes without sharing with anyone. The man was very nervous as he watched the process and wondered when they would be able to start discussing business. He saw that the shaman was enjoying the food, but he wanted to quickly move on to important questions and matters. At that moment, some girl turned her leg, attracting the attention of those around her. She explained that Mr. Bosal never talked about business until he was completely full. That was his rule. The man nodded and said that he now understood everything and was ready to wait as long as it took. At that moment, the shaman licked his fingers, slowly enjoying the taste and the process of eating. Then he exhaled heavily, indicating that the food had satisfied him and he was ready to work. The man wondered how much money would go towards this dinner at an elite Chinese restaurant, probably around $1 million. He was of course pleased with what was happening and looked with optimism at the upcoming events. The man called his assistant over to start the discussion and convey important information. He said that the gentleman was very pleased with the shaman's diligence and would now tell him how the rituals would take place and what would be required for this. The man was glad that things had finally moved forward and the process had begun. He took out his phone and said that he was listening carefully to all instructions and recommendations. He said he knew that the short position on Mansock steel opened by Golden Cross expired this Friday. Therefore, there is a very high probability that these bastards will begin to spoil the salguts from this evening until Thursday inclusive, and the gentleman said that he will pray for the shares from this evening, that is from Tuesday until Thursday evening. The man thanked them sincerely for the information and support, expressing deep appreciation for their help in a difficult situation. However, the girl immediately added that there was something else important that they needed to take into account and remember. The man did not understand at first what exactly was being discussed and eagerly awaited further explanations. She explained that they would have to prepare the rituals themselves without any outside help or support. The uninterrupted performance of rituals is ensured by the land that the Lord entrusted to the residents who applied for service today. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in a row, expensive dishes are required without interruption to maintain the shaman's strength. They are required to show utmost diligence and responsibility, otherwise the ritual and prayer will not be successful. The final exit and location of the death shaman is the last request of the master that they must fulfill. The man thought about this request, considering its seriousness and importance for the whole matter. At this point, the car slowly moved off and headed to the appointed meeting place without delay. The girl explained that the next ritual was scheduled for Thursday, so he needed to carefully monitor his condition. She noted that a thoughtful look appeared on his face, as if he was worried about upcoming events. He is concerned that the enemy may hire an experienced shaman while he is still considered only a novice specialist. In this case, there is a risk of losing the battle of rituals because the veteran's experience is much higher than the newcomers. The girl calmed him down, saying that the attitude was important, and so far she had not heard that they had started working against them. She advised not to wind yourself up and to focus on your own strengths and capabilities without being distracted. The driver said that they had already arrived at the main character's house and were ready to drop him off at any moment. Chun Chiang got out of the car feeling a little nervous and anticipating the important events that were about to happen. He then headed to his home to prepare for the meeting and subsequent actions that evening. The girl addressed him with respect, calling him Mr. Shaman of Sudden Death, emphasizing his status. She said that Mr. Bosal, whom she trusted, implicitly wanted to meet him personally. According to her, the meeting will not take much time, and he is already waiting for them in the underground parking lot next to the building. Chun Chiang agreed, and together with the girl headed to the designated place for the upcoming meeting. At the same time, the man was in the truck preparing to start the conversation and the upcoming important actions. Chun Chiang was greatly surprised by the rapid development of events and the upcoming meeting with a high-level shaman. The shaman extended his hand to him, offering a greeting and showing respect to establish a relationship of trust. Chun Chiang admitted that he had heard of Bosal but did not know who he was or what he actually did. He began to ask if the shaman was by any chance connected with Uido, but the girl abruptly stopped him, explaining the situation. She introduced the shaman as one of the best masters and recognized first-class specialists in his field. Among all shamans, he is among the top 5, which speaks of his high level of professionalism and experience. The gentleman said that this particular shaman would be his opponent in the upcoming battle for the company's shares. The main character realized that the situation was exactly what the girl was talking about: a serious battle of shamans to protect the shares. He urged the shamans not to give up on this matter because the shaman of sudden death has been very active lately. The gentleman has already successfully completed the previous rituals, raising the prices of many shares thanks to his experience, skill, and high-level reputation. Despite his enormous talent and skill, he remains a peace-loving person and does not want to get involved in obviously losing battles. If he fails to cope with the Salgut, he is promised a generous monetary reward for his efforts and attempts. The gentleman began to take something important out of his pocket, showing the seriousness and weight of his proposal. He threw jewelry and gold to the shaman, symbolizing trust and motivation to successfully complete the task. At this moment, he was silent, carefully watching the shaman's reaction and waiting for his decision on the matter. Chun Chiang watched the events closely, trying to understand the true meaning and seriousness of the situation for himself. The girl asked the shaman if he was ready to accept the master's generous offer and take on this important task. Suddenly, another girl appeared, abruptly declaring that this was complete nonsense and that she had noticed a suspicious man at the entrance. The man listened seriously, as if listening to sounds that resembled the squeak of some piglet in the distance. The girl in her rage could not understand what the word piglet meant, speaking only of Mr. Bosal and his fear of the newcomer. At that moment someone else immediately appeared, adding tension and heightening the drama of the situation between them. The man began to slowly stand up, preparing for further developments and a possible conflict. He said he wanted to give the newbie a chance, but called everyone insects, warning of the consequences and the curse. He also promised not to abandon the shares in which the dreams and hopes of many people are invested despite the obstacles. Cheon Chi-sung couldn't understand the other words, but he was able to make out this part and recognize it as important. Stocks are an investment product that ordinary people buy, and why he had not yet understood the suffering these people were experiencing was a mystery. All this raised many questions and doubts about the correctness of the ongoing process. At that moment the girl began to laugh loudly, as if finding something extremely funny and ironic in the situation. The man could not resist asking what exactly seemed funny to her in such a serious matter and conversation. She replied that she was surprised that he performed rituals to artificially raise the stock price of a company that had no values or achievements, and to bring down the shares of worthless companies and forcibly raise their prices in order to lure ordinary investors is pure madness and deception. Which of them is doing worse? Even he with his stubborn pighead should have understood and realized this. The man felt even more furious and indignant after such words, which sounded like an accusation of hypocrisy. The girl said that they would not be able to buy her with their pathetic excuses because they were hypocritical bastards who had lost their conscience. She suggested that they simply fight and find out their strength and power in a fair duel without words or excuses. The girl challenged them to a fight to determine which of them was truly more powerful and deserved to win.